Oh, you ready to go live? Let's go live. Let's start the show now.
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
This is Earl Benson, reporting from downtown Topeka, where Gizzard Gary is rampaging through the city. Authorities have asked the public to stay indoors. They believe he will tire soon and need a nap. Gizzard Gary can normally be seen on Foul Territory, Friday nights at 7 p.m. Central. Wednesday, 8 p.m. for the channel members chat. Stay safe and give him the bird. Earl Benson signing off.
GearWebsites.com is your source for firearms-based playing cards and books. We also have mugs, shirts, and posters with designs that we've made live. Of course, we have patches. Every Friday is Free Patch Friday. We appreciate your support. Thank you for shopping at GearWebsites.com.
And welcome, everybody. I think we've got everything getting ready now. Co-host is warm. Just went outside. It's 100 degrees. Oh, it's 102 degrees in the shade out there. So he's pretty warm. He'll be exhausted here in a bit, and he'll fall asleep. We'll get going with the show. We're a little bit late today. Forgot it was Tuesday. Holiday week. It mixed me up. So instead of going live an hour late, we waited for a Tuesday segment of the Grace Curley Show, hosted by Cape Funworks. We waited for that to be over, and we started our show after that. All right, so let's get into it. We'll take the co-host off the screen here since he refuses to go down. He'll fall asleep here in a minute. And we'll bring up the screen here. We'll put the puppy down in the corner so everybody can verify that the puppy has still not gone to sleep. And we'll chat about our podcast for a bit. Most of the people listening to this, especially on an off day like this one, are probably listening to us on the podcast. And we are now on the Podbean, and I recently kicked it out to a whole bunch of new podcast platforms. We had been on the iTunes and the iHeartRadio and the Amazon one, but we started getting a bunch of more podcasts from our listeners, I guess, from different podcast platforms. So we decided to branch out and take full advantage of what Podbean has over there. So wherever you might be listening to this one, welcome. And even though you're listening this after it's recorded live, we do record live over on YouTube and the X, so you can join us over in those places and say hey. Otherwise, we're jumping over to our Substack, which is essentially a blog, and that's where we put some information about today's topic. On Tuesdays, we do the 2A Media Workshop, the 2A Content Creator Workshops, consulting. And this is kind of along the lines of both of those, I guess. And every once in a while, I think, hey, can you hear this dog breathing? Let me find out from the audience if you're out there listening live. Can you hear this dog? Because we can put this dog down. If he refuses to go to sleepy, no, just go to sleepy there, guy. Very noisy co-host. Oh, there's sheep fires out there. Welcome. We've been crossing streams. I'm usually out running around driving on Sundays, so occasionally I caught you when I wasn't driving, but now that I've been driving more, I don't catch it in the vehicle, so I have to watch it on the reruns. But do you hear this dog barking or making too much noise? If so, we can get rid of him. We can definitely get rid of him. But thanks for joining us live, and if you're listening to the podcast again, leave us some feedback out there. So today we're going live to talk about kind of a mix between a workshop and a content creation show, because this is something I'm not even familiar with. I don't know nothing about it. I'm letting the robots teach me, and then I'm going to show you what I learned from the robots. And I kind of thought about bringing some experts in the field on to talk about this, and if it's a topic that people have an interest in, we can do that in the future. But our topic today is parasocial relationships, specifically in Second Amendment. So this, I guess, is not a new phenomenon, something new for me to hear about or to think about, I guess, specifically, at least in this terms. I'm putting him down. He wants to run around, probably wants something to drink. I guess I don't need that screen anymore either, since he's not even in here. So it's something I hadn't heard about. I think I'm trying to remember now what I listened to. Something a week or two ago, I was listening to something, and it was brought up, and I went, that's interesting. And I started to think about how it would apply to specifically this show, and that got me thinking, like what we're going to talk about today, it kind of applies to both the content creator and the viewer side of this whole thing. I got to figure out how to get my. I guess I can just move my screen. No, I can't move my screen. I'm sharing the screen. My desk is falling apart, and that's pushing this thing over, so I can't see my screen. So let me know if this still works. If I put the microphone way over here, that's not. See, it's going to move again. What do I do to get this thing to quit moving on me? At least I did. At least the puppy figured this all out before the show. Hopefully this is still okay. Let me know if this is still got good audio. I guess I can listen to myself over here. Hopefully this is still okay. Yeah, okay. So yeah, this idea of a parasocial relationship is essentially an audience relationship with somebody they're listening to, right? So I was like, that's interesting. How does this apply to, thanks for the feedback. How does this apply to, what we got going on with Second Amendment? And, my whole thing is let's get us out of this skip in the record that has us going around in circles, and let's move on. Let's get past some of these BS back and forth discussions that rely on essentially people being unaware. So how do we create awareness? How do we normalize guns, and how do we move on from this so that we can talk about other things that really matter to the country? So with that in mind, how do these parasocial relationships have anything to do with what we're talking about? So what I attempted to do, because I'm paying for the robots now, I'm paying for the fancy GPT-4.0 robot. Let's see what the GPT-4.0 came up with. So I went in there and I asked it some questions, and then the whole point of the new chat robots is that it is supposedly going to learn from my questions, and it's going to not give me as much general answers and give me better and better answers as time goes on. So let's find out if that's the case. So we're not going to get into the prompts and stuff, and I'm not going to read everything it came up with, but I will give you the link to the Substack so you can check it out. What I do, I'll give you the link to the Substack so you can go check it out for yourself, and that will effectively give you all of the details that I'm going to skip over. And this is not everything that the robot kicked out. I tried to clean it up a little bit and adjust it a little bit, so it might be a little bit weird because it's a lot of me chatting back and forth with the robot, and then it's copying and pasting just pieces of it over here. So it's like a little patchwork of responses from the robot. Puppy is now, of course, butthurt because he's on the floor and he's not up here. So what are you going to do? Coming up here, or are you going to stay down here? He wants both ways somehow, so I don't know how to do that. We'll probably have a co-host back in a little while. All right, so delve into the fascinating phenomenon known as parasocial relationships. This concept explores the psychological bonds that audiences form with media personalities through their mediated encounters. Despite having little or no direct interaction, viewers and listeners often perceive these performers as friends, developing a sense of familiarity and emotional connection. So I think that in a summary explains what it kind of got me interested in this. So now we'll kind of dig through and dig into it, and let me know if there's something that this is better to have a conversation in the future on, because again, I'm no expert on this. I'm just barely learning about it myself. So essentially the concept was interesting to me, and whenever I hear something new, I wonder how it's going to apply to Second Amendment. And like I say, we're kind of stuck in a track here. We're going around and around in circles on a record. We need to skip out of that and move on and get to the end of this whole thing, which is a conclusion, right? There's no law that says we have to spin out of control forever with this dumbass back and forth just because anti-gunners are unrealistically scared of guns. It's stupid. So let's get guns normalized, and we're back to where we were back in our grandparents, great grandparents, depending on how old you are. In their generation, people weren't preoccupied with their being scared of guns. So and one of the ways we can do that, there's lots of ways we can do that, but one of the reasons I think we're stuck in this rut is this glitch. So part of this is to let audiences understand this, and part of this is to let content creators understand this, so we can step over some pitfalls and hopefully see some of these things in our existing situations, so that we can, I don't know, readjust and act appropriately, I hope, or at least that's the goal. So let's move into it. Understanding the parasocial relationships. We're going to define it, and then I asked it why those are significant, and then the brief historical context. I think I did these out of order, so I'm going to do the brief historical one, I think, first. Yep, the first one is brief historical. So has anyone heard of this before, since we do have a bunch of people joining us live? Hold on, I'm going to see if I can kill a fly. I'm being dive bombed by a big horsefly right now. Has anyone ever heard of a parasocial relationship? Is this something I'm just haven't, I've been missing and it's out there? Like I said, I know it's just a term to this whole idea of a audience's relationship with content creator, essentially. But it sounds like it was, and if this is correct, I have no idea. This is the robot telling me this. Robots will be confidently wrong all the time. So if it's correct, it looks like it came out in the 1950s when some sociologists, people who study society, I guess, while they were studying television, I think, we'd already had the newspaper and the radio, and now this television was happening. And I suspect for a minute there, the telegraph was probably also a part of this, the dime novels and that kind of stuff. But I imagine radio really kicked it into gear, and then television soon after. And we've just been hooked on television as a society for a long time. And that's something that went out around the world. I know we didn't invent it necessarily. It kind of depends on who you want to talk to about who invented television. But we certainly, in the United States, wailed on it. Like everybody else thought it was neat, and we took it to the next level, like we do. But I suspect one of the reasons a lot of people hate us is because of that, because we brought a rapidly different culture to their slow ass developing cultures, right? It doesn't matter what continent you want to go to, whatever continent it was before television and radio, it was developing slow. Then radio and television happened, and everything got fast, quick. So a lot of people hated that shit. So there's people that probably still hate us from that time. And this is a factor of that, right? Everything, all the pop culture stuff that we got is essentially this, right? So essentially, if this started to be understood in the 50s after television, they explored how audiences develop a one-sided relationship with media figures. And then this study was conducted during the early days of television, when the medium was rapidly becoming a staple. They viewed that viewers often felt they were engaging in face-to-face interactions with personalities despite the lack of any reciprocal communication, and this was termed parasocial interaction. So I always talk about the brain nerds who go to school to learn how our mammal brains think, and this is the kind of shit I've thought about when I'm talking about that. They understand that we think we're having a direct relationship with another person because that's what we're used to. And the technology makes that seamless. I mean, when we have a live conversation and there's two of us, we're literally doing that, having this direct conversation. But everybody else thinks they're the third person in that conversation. I don't think that's a bad thing or a good thing, but it should be understood, right? We shouldn't just take anything for granted, because then we get stuff used against us. So this parasocial interaction, describing the illusion of a personal relationship fostered by media consumption. They noticed that talk show hosts and anchors, fictional characters, could evoke feelings of friendship and intimacy among viewers. And I think we all know this, right? But this is just like a scientific look at it, or clinical look at it. Early research highlighted that these interactions provided emotional support and a sense of companionship especially those who might be socially isolated. So again, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but it certainly has allowed us to find people to find each other, right? Whether it be, you reload some obscure caliber like 9mm. Very few people would do something like that. So those people, they have to find each other on the internet. They're socially isolated because of the caliber they choose. Over time, the scope of parasocial relationships expand beyond television to include radio, film, and eventually digital media. What do you know? As the media landscape evolved, so did the understanding of these relationships. The rise of internet and social platforms in the 21st century brought new dimensions to the concept. I think that's an understatement, right? Today, audiences can engage with media personalities through comments, likes, and direct messages, blurring the lines between parasocial and social interactions. Despite these advances, the core idea remains the same. Individuals form meaningful, albeit one-sided, connections with public figures, fulfilling a fundamental human need for social interaction and belonging. So I wonder, and that's why I was debating whether I should bring somebody on, maybe a sociologist. I know a couple of them, I think, or people in the field of brain nerding or whatever. But, is this something that we're allowed to talk about as sophisticated nerds? But I feel like this is the kind of stuff where it's being used to mess with us. And if we're not aware of it, then we're susceptible to it. And hopefully as a content creator, we're not falling into some bullshit trap that is doing this to people. Hopefully. Let's see. Chief saying, I have not heard of the term parasocial, but it makes sense. I can relate. I don't. So like I said, just keep going. So the definition of a parasocial relationship, I guess we've already alluded to it, but I asked the robot, give me a definition. Parasocial relationships are one-sided relationships where an individual feels a deep connection with a media personality despite the lack of direct interaction. These relationships occur through mediated encounters such as watching television, listening to radio, or following social media influencers. Audiences often perceive these personalities as friends, developing emotional bonds and a sense of familiarity, even though the interaction is unreciprocated and entirely mediated by the media. And by the media, I think that means like by the method that you're communicating with them, right? Whether it be books or magazines or radio or whatever it is. But yeah, right. So is there a difference between like what we're doing? Because we can't do anything wrong. We're not doing anything wrong. So like when we're doing the live chats like this, you're interacting. Like literally, this isn't with a lack of interaction. This has direct interaction. So maybe it doesn't count live streams. Maybe it only counts produced content. Produced content is the ones that are, they got time to re-edit it. Oh no, I'm going to put on such and such a hat because that hat will ring better with my audiences, or I'm going to take this out of my background because the audiences didn't like it or something like that. Where live, you're just wearing whatever hat you were wearing, whatever shows up in your background is there. I don't know if there's a right or wrong to any of this. So explanation of how parasocial relationships form and why they're significant. So they're saying that these happen from repeated exposure. So, when we have social now, that happens pretty quick, especially when most of the recipes say to, post content often, at least scheduled, if not, depending on the recipe, you're going to choose daily. There's definitely Instagram and the fast platforms. They're going to expect you to do daily, if not multiple times daily. And, from our side of it, from the content creator side of it, we don't sit there and type a thing on Instagram daily. We're not sitting in front of Instagram daily, especially the people who master Instagram. They might monitor Instagram once in a while, but more than likely they're monitoring what their Instagram people are telling them, because if you're seeing somebody post 3 or 4 times a day, unless they got nothing else to do, but if they're doing it for real, then they've got some kind of scheduling software, or they got an account manager or somebody that's doing that for them. And that's on a schedule. It's like 3 posts of this followed by this, whatever. There's lots of different recipes, but essentially you post and then you go interact on Instagram. So if you'll see people interact, at 3 p.m. every day, or maybe it's really whenever they post, like depending on the recipe they're following, you're going to post and then you're going to immediately interact with the platform. You're going to do that 3 or 4 times, and then you're going to like a bunch of shit. So if you see people liking and interacting with your shit, is that because they actually care about your shit, or is it because that's when they posted and that's the recipe to make their post potentially go viral? That's the wind you put underneath your post. So there's those kind of things, and people that interpret that as, oh, this person's hanging out on Instagram with me. That's the dangerous part. In fact, like I say, most of the people that really whale on Instagram, they're never on Instagram. They hate it because they have to whale on it. They have to think of it as a job. So they usually jump the hell off of it. It usually ruins it for them as a pleasurable thing. And honestly, if they're doing it for real, if they do anything too pleasurable on it, they risk alienating people. So they won't do anything real. They'll just do, stage things, staged reality. But then same goes with YouTube. Most of us schedule our shows out here. Well, not just schedule a live show, but, schedule shows, create content, and then schedule it. But the more frequently an individual consumes content from a particular personality, the more familiar and comfortable they become with them. I know that happens to me. I mean, just even back in the old days, right? We sit around still talking about watching the cartoons and stuff that we watched back in the day. So I've always known that that's the reason they call it programming, right? There's an amount of, is it indoctrination? Is it brainwashing? I don't know what the word is, but we decide we got nothing else to do. We're going to sit here and watch this cartoon or this thing over and over. Pretty much ever since the days of VCRs, we've been able to do this to ourselves, and we'll just watch the same thing over and over. And then, we pretty much like those logos. We like those jokes. We understand the inside jokes and stuff. And then, it just becomes part of our everything, our culture and everything. So, and our humor and our tastes, right? Like all that kind of stuff. And interesting. And when you think about it from the people who, when did they figure this first out? Did they figure this out in black and white movies? Did they figure this out during the 80s with cable when they could show something on HBO like 1,000 times? What's a movie that they played on HBO back in the day 1,000 times? I'm trying to think of one of them. I hate those movies. All those Richard Pryor movies. Like, what's that? There's some fucking movie. Sorry. There's some movie where he's jumping around on a piano. One of these movies, they're jumping around on a piano. I bet you those pianos sold like wildfire. And they figured out, oh, wow, if we play this horrible movie that's not even that good over and over and over, then people are going to buy crap off of it. Then it's worth making crappy movies with a couple of product placements in them, because we know that they're going to play them over and over to fill time. And that's going to sell the things. So I don't know. I don't know when they figured that out. Probably whenever we started seeing products and movies on the big, on our regular. But anyway, like I say, we have, I don't know what I'm trying to prove here, though, other than, these are kind of obvious things, but the robot's bringing them to light in a bullet points here. Perceived intimacy. Media personalities often share personal stories and aspects of their daily lives, creating a sense of intimacy and openness. I think that's a strategy. Not all of them, of course. Audiences feel they are getting to know the media personality on a personal level, similar to how they would get to know a friend. Well, see, that's the thing. Are we friends? Or are we not? Who knows? I don't know. Even though the interaction is one-sided, the format of the media can create an illusion of a two-way relationship. And, for example, talk shows, vlogs, and live streams often address the audience directly, making viewers feel included and acknowledged. DM Foss, welcome. I hope you feel acknowledged and included. So see how creepy that is? This is part of the whole thing. Then we got emotional engagement, content that evokes strong emotional responses, whether through humor, drama, or personal anecdotes, helps deepen the bond. And I suspect you've got maybe fitting into drama there is the fear, right? The sky is falling, folks, or the they're out to get you, or it's all over. The doom gloomers. Audiences become emotionally invested in the lives and stories of the media personalities, and that's a difficult one. I've known that one for a long time. It would happen even on the days, like all different kinds of places that would happen, and we lean into it on the internet for sure. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is it like the evolution of communication, or is it the de-evolution of conversation? I've recently, thanks to DM Foss, been watching Survivors, this 3 seasons of a BBC television show from the 1975 to 1977. And it's essentially Jericho. If you've ever watched Jericho, it was always been one of my favorite shows. It only lasted for 2 seasons, and it was fairly corny. Survivors is better than Jericho in that it's not that it's better because it's in Europe, because nothing's better in Europe, but it's better because they have a lot of conversations about this stuff. And, one of these things is getting mass communication or getting stuff out there. All right. So, are we better off? I think I was getting at that. They kind of alluded to it in there that there was a point where, maybe it wasn't there, but I'm trying to remember now where I heard the kind of a summary of it, and it brought it up to where journalism became professional, and it was because it was fairly chaotic for a while. And so at some point, journalism was chaotic and people were skeptical on what to believe. So they came up with the idea of going to school for journalism and getting whatever we call the skills of being an actual reporter. And I guess that was an effort. That was a reaction to a lack of interest in what people were saying. So I'm wondering if this isn't just a big cycle that is just longer than most of our lifespan. So unless you're paying attention to it for some reason, we're not aware it's a cycle, or it's the downfall of stuff, or it's the lack of organized or useful data, reporting, and it turns into all emotional, manipulative reporting, and then people are just going to be skeptical of it, and then it'll just be propaganda. Everything you watch is propaganda. I mean, I guess technically everything we watch is propaganda now, but is it propaganda for something, or is it propaganda for the sake of its own self, or for its own statement? Anyway, I think the emotional thing is an interesting one, and I think that even back in the day, somebody probably would, like the Beatles or whatever, in the olden days, that was black and white TV and mono, and people were still falling in love with the Beatles, right? I'm sure there was some amount of emotional engagement with, I can't think of that guy's name. Who, Walter Cronkite? I don't know, whoever those old newspaper or old TV reporters were, or whoever, whenever they have like a Superman show, they make it look like reporters. Somebody gives a shit about newspaper reporters. There might have been a time when people knew who newspaper reporters were, and then, had emotional engagement with them because of their choice of stories or the way they use their words or something. Like, who knows? Well, I guess I don't know. It's older than me. But, is that something that we're paying attention to as we create content? I definitely feel like that's something that people use against us. As, you watch people fake ass chuckle or fake ass do shit because they know that these are part of the recipes. Like some of the recipes include these elements. And when people suck at mixing the recipe up, you can kind of tell when they're just reading a recipe, versus people that probably just have some of these elements, because these are also just the elements of life, I think, to some extent. Let's see. Now we're getting into consistency and reliability. Regular posting schedules and consistent content themes help build a sense of reliability and trust. I guess that's interesting. Is there something to that? People trust news that comes out every Friday evening, for example, where other places are here, all over the place with their dropping their stuff. I think we're told for recipes to be consistent with our content creation, and it might have to tie back to this. Viewers or listeners rely on media personalities for entertainment, information, or companionship. Well, I think that can be the case. I can't think of any that I listen to right now because of the time they're on. I listen to Gizzard because he's on before me, but I've also been a friend of Gizzard for a long time, so I'd be listening to that show regardless. But I'm trying to think of any other shows I only listen to because of what time they're on. I pretty much make time for the stuff I'm listening to, I think. Or I should say, the stuff that I'm listening to, I make the decision to listen to it, or else, instead of doing something else, I guess, or how do you say that? Cronkite was still huge when we were kids on CBS. Yeah, but I don't remember anybody fighting in a line about like, oh yeah, well, you better take that back about Walter Cronkite or something. But I do think that was happening with Vanna White and shit like that. There was those kind of conversations. Another BBC News, somebody is pretty dope for 70s. I don't know what that is, but I think the one guy who is involved with Survivors was involved with something called Blake 7, because I heard of that. Let's see. So, significance of parasocial relationships, the emotional support, the influence on beliefs and behaviors, the community building, got marketing and advocacy. And then, how interesting is this? Mental health and well-being. So that's the significance of it. But then I said something like, I guess this section that we've been talking about here that I kind of went through, that whole formation of them, was the section called How Parasocial Relationships Form and Why They're Significant. So the end of that is understanding parasocial relationships helps explain the powerful connection people feel with media figures and the significant role these relationships play in modern media consumption and social dynamics. And while I haven't seen it termed like this, you can see some of the elements here are, what's the word? Like are elements that are in the recipes. You know, the consistency. They're suggesting that repeated exposure and the consistency and reliability, those are, you know, the kind of things that you'd see in the recipes for how to succeed at creating content. So, you know, whether or not there's an awareness that these things are touching this, I don't know. So that's why I'm saying all this stuff. So we've got the emotional support. So we have the significance, and then we have the next section is building the bond, right? And some of this, it got into more, the robot sort of just answered, and some of it answered specifically to 2A, and I would have to try to steer it back if it got too kind of general. And I think I wanted to come down to this because up here it had the whole mental health thing, and I like that, but a couple of sections down, I asked it the implications for Second Amendment activists, and it came up with both positive and negative without me asking for it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So that's what I'm going to get into, but I'm going to go skip through these again real quick just because of that mental health part. Okay, so the significant is the emotional support, the influence on beliefs and behaviors, community building, marketing and advocacy, mental health and well-being. So parasocial relationships provide emotional support and companionship, especially for individuals who feel isolated or lonely. Well, again, I think that, I mean, I guess that's true, but, you know, people could probably feel isolated and go outside and look at a bird and feel good, or read a newspaper and feel the same way. But I do think there's some potential for bringing people together who feel isolated, but they're not. Like, you know, the people that like some, I don't know, cowboy action shooting or something. And they know that there's some people that like it, but now they can find more people than they can imagine by using the tech that's out there. But I'm trying to think of how some of this stuff affects 2A. The relationships can fulfill social needs, offering a sense of connection. I guess this is the opportunity and the result, or the opportunity and the potential, maybe. Then you got influence on beliefs. I think this one's interesting. Media personalities can significantly influence their audience's opinions, behaviors, and lifestyle choices. We know that because that's why half the reason people do what they're doing, I think, is to do this. You can influence somebody's opinion on, I don't know, something they're going to buy. So then you get some sponsors, right? Audiences often look up to these personalities as a role model or trusted source of information. I hope that ain't true. I don't know. I think you can have respect for somebody putting in work for something that's getting done, even if they're selling something. You could probably even have some admiration or interest in people that are just dancing around, because what the hell, people allowed to just dance around. You can like that. But role models, I don't know about all that. I think we've got plenty of Second Amendment advocates out there that are role models, and then researchers and authors and shit like that that are trusted sources of information. So I hope people aren't looking up to whatever they're calling influencers or personalities, because that's, I think, a feedback loop. That's the danger, right? We have a feedback loop. If people are only online dancing because they want to be seen dancing, so they're going to dance to whatever's popular, whatever people are going to watch, that's a feedback loop waiting to happen, because then they're not going to filter what they're dancing to. They're just going to potentially get stuck in these ruts. They're going to just keep dancing because they know people are going to show up. And if they're not monitoring the audience's reaction, they're just monitoring the audience's size and how much money they're making, then you can have a large number of people cycling through and only being there for 2 or 3 dances and never coming back again. And they're still going to be making money. They're still going to be perceived as popular, and they're still going to keep doing their stupid bullshit. And they're never going to understand that they're just churning through people who could have been more interested and could have done a lot of other things if they'd have been more welcoming than repelling. But we'll keep moving. Shared admiration of media personality can bring together like-minded individuals, fostering a sense of community among fans. That seems optimistic. I like to be optimistic, but I'd like to see where that's happening on the positive. Online communities and fan groups can form around these shared interests, enhancing social interaction. Again, I don't know that one so much. I'd like to see this one be utilized more. We definitely have people that get people online. They get their numbers, they get their satisfaction, whatever they're looking for. Maybe it's a couple of bucks from a sponsor or something, but then they're done. Like, what do they do community building besides that? So I could think of maybe a few. If I had to think of a couple of people that are out there actually creating community for the sake of creating community. But I think community building is a subset, is a afterthought of the marketing on some people's thing. So I think as content creators, think of the power here, and as audiences, think of the potential on this one. Marketing and advocacy. Parasocial relationships are valuable for marketing and advocacy efforts. Media personalities with strong parasocial bonds can effectively promote products, causes, and ideas. That's one of the ruts we're stuck in for sure. Their endorsements are often perceived as genuine and trustworthy, leading to higher engagement and impact. I think this has an expiration date. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think this expires, like people start to wear out their welcome and their bullshit the detectors start going off, especially when people ain't doing shit. And they're just, the problem is we've got a bunch of people who can jump in on election years, and that's a pretty long cycle. There's not that many people stick around for 4-year cycles plus. And even if they do, they only experience one cycle of these 4-year cycles. So they're not going to be offended by it. Once you're around for 3 or 4 of the cycles, you start to see it's obvious that some people only come around during election years. That can be frustrating because those people come in and use a lot of these techniques, actually. Mental health and well-being. This is one I did this whole section here for. I didn't see this. I copied and pasted all this and essentially edited a couple of things, but I didn't even notice this when I was doing it. Mental health and well-being. Positive parasocial relationships can contribute to an individual's mental well-health by providing a sense of stability and joy. I hope that's true. I wonder if somebody who's really not a robot and actually a human, who's a doctor or such, whatever, would be able to validate that or not. What do you think? Is that true, or is that delusion? Robot delusion. Robots trying to get us to listen to voices on the computers. However, it's important to recognize the potential downsides, such as an over-reliance on those relationships or disappointment if the media personality behaves contrary to the audience's expectations. That kind of, I don't know why it's in mental health, but I think this is a super critical one. I'd like to have seen it somewhere else, but we have to be aware of these things because they can be used against us inadvertently or intentionally. And they can be used against you on both sides. If you're a content creator and you think creating a community, you're done. No, community is a difficult ass thing to do, especially if you give a shit about the people in the community, because guess what? People like dumbass shit like 9mm. So you're going to get all these 9mm people who are going to insist on that fad, and they're going to make havoc for all the people who like decent calibers. It's just, and that's just what you got to deal with, right? You're either going to tell them, hey, no 9mm in here. Yeah, it makes it a lot more harmonious, right? People aren't delusional because they all know that their caliber choice is a good one. But then you're not open to everybody. So if you bring in the 9mm people, you got to be ready for some discontent or whatever. So that's what's going to happen. You talk about something, and some people are going to go, "Oh, I can't believe they talked about that. I'm out of here." And that's a whole big piece of it. So yeah, there's no secrets. There's no shortcuts. And sometimes people know there's these rifts, and they'll just understand that one side of the rift is huge and the other side ain't. So, when it's time to, when they say fish or cut bait, they will, I don't know if that's the right one. They'll say some of this stuff though, just to cut chunks of people off from their followers. They just know, hey, if I say something about XYZ, I'll lose about 30% of them. But when people are really doing the math, that the percent that I'm going to lose there, good riddance. So they'll just say whatever they need to say, get rid of those folks. And sometimes they get a couple of folks from the other side, but usually it just quietly removes a bunch of people from their pools, and they keep moving. So that's something that you kind of see when you're used to this stuff, when you've seen people around long enough, and you kind of notice when they do things like that. But I don't know why it's in mental health and well-being. I don't think it has anything to do with that really. But what do you think? I haven't looked over the chat anywhere. Do you think that a parasocial relationship can actually contribute to individuals' mental well-being by providing a sense of stability and joy? Or is that robot delusion? Artec says, I don't want anyone to feel they're left out. New York Outcast feels left out by that statement, so that's what happens. Good afternoon. Mike Wade's out there. So Foss is saying, I think it can provide a sense of stability and joy, but it may be dependent on the content itself being there. It might build independent stability. I like that. You could probably build into it. I'm trying to read his comment more. Like you could build into deliberately creating some independence. I like to say that that's what we did at Gun Channels. We did it as a reaction to YouTube trying to be a Facebook-ish way, and did that Google Plus or whatever. So, technically we immediately were reacting to that. But you could also say that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. We had been live for, at that point, 3 years, pretty much constantly, every day on YouTube. And we were all kind of sick of the platforms, just, boundaries, like whatever they were, even they were different than they are now. And our conversations were certainly different. Everybody was looking for, something different. Dale's internet's not working. I don't know if that's mine. I should have good internet, but every once in a while I see the connection go down. Maybe I'll start blaming StreamYard, because then I don't have to blame myself or my internet. Would you like to come to the second one? You can come to goals in August. All right, so everybody wants to say, since we've got a bunch of people out there, who else going to goals? Feel free. All right, so I thought that was interesting that they brought up mental health and well-being. And if I wasn't trying to talk here, if I was actually preparing this better as a topic or a presentation or something, then I think I would try to incorporate that mental health thing to it for sure. So it's an interesting aspect. I certainly hope I could be optimistic about it as the robot is. All right, so implications. And by the way, these pictures that came up on this whole thing are asking various robots to make pictures based on the stuff we're talking about in here. So yeah, these are just the robot's interpretation of conversations or the topics that we're talking about in here. For anybody that's listening as a podcast, I just put pictures in here since on the Substack, they can, and it's boring if you just put words in here. So explanation of, but that don't really mean anything. They don't have anything to do with what we're talking about. They're just weird computer versions of what they think we're talking about. It is degrading every time. I'm showing you. I'll have to do a live about how dismissive and degrading the internet robots are whenever you bring up Second Amendment, because they essentially make us all look like a bunch of dingus idiots. So, gun wielding idiots. So, yeah, I don't know if it's worth trying to learn the platforms or learn the things you're not really supposed to, but they've obviously been learned the other way. But it might be possible to do some real conscientious efforts to change the internet. That would be neat, part of the normalization of guns. But that is a subject for a different time. But for whoever's listening, if you're wondering why it sounds junky, maybe you're listening as a podcast. My internet signal thingy is telling me my connection is only fairly good, when in reality I have fancy new internet cables and Gizzards is this new internet modem, so it should be working really well. So I'm now blaming StreamYard for that. StreamYard was built in Canada and sold to the French. Just saying. Maybe one of these days I'll quit paying them $25 a month and go somewhere else. Maybe I'll find out it was StreamYard the whole time. They want me to upgrade. They say I do too much on here, I imagine. But I wouldn't say they're intentionally screwing with my internet. Holy moly, we have a lot of people watching on X. No wonder nobody's commenting. I never paid attention, but we have way more people watching on X. That's why nobody's commenting over here. I forgot that if you hover over the little eyeball, it tells you where people are watching. So y'all on YouTube are getting the fair advantage of being able to have your comments show up on the screen. Everybody on X ain't, because of the way X has their API. So what am I supposed to do about it? I can't do nothing about it. But Mike White's over here on YouTube. DJ's out here. Artac, DM Foss, Dale might be here still, maybe not. And New York Outcast. Did I ever say Artac? And She Fires was here earlier. I think that's everybody. Scrolling all the way to the top, I think that's everybody. It's possible I missed somebody, so feel free to say something. But now I know that everybody's watching over on the X. There's Gizzard. Welcome. Okay, so we're talking about parasocial relationships. We're getting closer to the end here. An explanation of how parasocial relationships form and how they're significant. What am I doing? I jumped up to the top here. We're going down to this section. Implications of parasocial relationships for Second Amendment activists, both positive and negative. So thanks for sticking with me through all this. It's kind of random and all over the place because, one, I'm not an expert in this. Two, I just thought it would be an interesting thing since I haven't seen anybody else talk about it before. And three, some of us, half of us are creating content or involved in creating content. And the other half of us, well, all of us are absorbing or consuming content. So, be aware and be aware on both sides, what you're doing, how you're creating, and what you're being fed. Right, so let's see. The positive implications are that it can enhance advocacy and influence. All right, community building, kind of talked about that one already. Increased engagement and loyalty. That tends to be like come back and buy again, but whatever. Educational impact. All right, and now it's got, and that's actually a pretty big one. Educational impact is, I think, one of the things that we're most lacking as a sector. But anyway, the negative implications are pressure and expectations. I don't know. Overzealous followers. I guess maybe. Echo chambers and bias. I think that can be a big one for sure, right? Ethical considerations. That's because the robots hate guns. So I'm going to say screw this ethical considerations since we are already ethical, or else we wouldn't even be talking about shit. But I think there's one other one in here, and that would be, oh man, I was just thinking about it. Pressure. Okay. Overzealous followers, like maybe the last one, because it's a very rare thing. Echo chambers. I was thinking, and feel free to throw in whatever you want as far as what a negative implication would be, but I guess I was going to say, is it the same to say wearing out your welcome or crying wolf? Like, I think there's the negative side is to wear out your welcome. I don't know what the word is for that, or like how to say that better. And we'll get to that, but I'm going to get rid of that last one. I'm going to change the last one out because the robot's just trying to make it look like gun owners don't know how to stay rational. And that's bullshit manipulation by the robots. But let's go back up and talk about positive implications. And there's 4 of them here. The first one, enhanced advocacy and influence. Strengthened advocacy, parasocial relationships can amplify and reach the impact of Second Amendment activists. Audiences who feel a personal connection are more likely to support and advocate for the activist causes. I think that's the case, but you got to jump back and tell me if you agree with this. You got to be careful because the double-edged sword of that one is where was it? They get pissed when I can't find it now, but they get mad when you are in any way inconsistent or if you stop. So I think there's, relying on, where'd it go? Relying on advocacy and influence, or really relying on this parasocial relationship for advocacy is risky. For influence, who cares? Because they got nothing to lose, right? Oh no, you're not going to buy their pancake flipper. Or no, you're not going to buy their like lens optic or whatever. They probably don't care if they've lost you because, they're paying to reach 10 people and you're just one of the people that they didn't succeed in reaching. So I think if it's influence, they could care less about the implications. But I think for advocacy, we run into that problem where if people have too much of a personal, this parasocial, this I don't want to call it fake social, but it's a parasocial, other than an actual social relationship. Is that the way to think of it? Then you can be offended and not even know it. And now the person is advocating for something important and they offend somebody. And now that person isn't going to advocate for something important because of that person. You know what I mean? Like I think that's more of a risk. Like I say, for influence, like, hey, if you're going to buy Coke over Pepsi, who cares? You're going to buy Coke over Pepsi, but now I'm not because I don't like the team that person voted for or whatever. Like, that's big deal. That's just marketing. But when we get into the advocacy side, I don't know. I'm just repeating myself now. Influence on public opinion. Activists can leverage those relationships to influence public opinion on gun rights and related issues. Followers are more receptive to the messages and perspectives shared by someone they feel connected to. Well, I say bullshit on this. So if that was the case, we have tons of huge channels and all they'd have to do is mention things once or twice, right? And we'd have people lining up to do stuff. So I just don't think that this has the pull that people think. It certainly does for like to purchase Coke over Pepsi, but somebody was going to buy a soda anyway. All they did is get them to buy Coke instead of Pepsi. But that person already was sold on soda because it's a tasty treat that they wanted anyway. But if you're trying to get people to get up and go blend some spinach instead of drinking a soda, good luck. Good luck. I don't care how fancy you are or how much of a following you got. You're not going to get somebody to just start doing something that's not in their tendency, I think. I don't think I'm being pessimistic. That's just more realistic. Community building. Fostering a supportive community. Parasocial relationships help create a strong, supportive community around Second Amendment issues. Fans and followers can connect with each other, fostering a sense of unity and shared purpose. Damn, that would have been a great thing for gun channels. So I hope that we can do this. I don't know if everyone has that goal in mind with their content, but I think it's got the potential for this for sure. The second part of this is mobilizing support. A dedicated fan base can be mobilized for events, campaigns, and advocacy efforts, increasing the activists' ability to organize and execute impactful initiatives. How awesome would that be? I think that's possible. I don't see, is there someone who's doing this that I'm not aware of in a big way? I hope I'm missing one. As far as when they say, mobilized for events and campaigns, I can't think of anybody, even people that aren't necessarily in my realm. I don't see too many people bringing a lot of people to the table, except for Trump maybe, but that's not even guns, right? So I think there's the potential there, though. We got increased engagement and loyalty. And I think this is why we see it as a recipe that people use. It's why it's an ingredient people use in their recipes. This whole like create an fostering a parasocial relationship. And I'm pretty sure, can you tell when people are trying to do these parasocial relationships intentionally? Can you tell when people are like kind of, trying to do it? I think I can. I mean, at least it's possible. I think it's, it's obvious when it's forced. I mean, that's the way to say it. So we got loyal audience base. Followers who feel a personal connection are more likely to engage with content regularly and remain loyal over time. This can result in higher viewership, more comments, shares, likes on social media platforms. It can. I don't think it does like a recipe. It can. And I think people probably experiment with this, and when they don't see it happen, they book out of it. I mean, that definitely happens, but there's so many people with so many reasons to why they want to create content in the first place. And they have all kinds of expectations out of it. Some people are going to be comfortable with the parasocial relationships and the other people ain't, right? I think that's probably an element that's not mentioned in here, that some people ain't going to be able to handle this. Like they have to have a personal relationship or a one-on-one relationship, or they just want to be in an audience, like both sides of that extreme. I think there's I don't know how big the people are, but there's a group of people in the middle that can handle being on either side of one of these relationships. But I think there's a bunch of people that probably why they don't go on social media. They don't want to be part of that on either side. And then financial support. Loyal followers may contribute financially through donations, merchandise purchases, or paid subscriptions, providing activists with necessary resources to continue their work. Dang, I wish that was the case. So it's possibly the case for entertainers for sure. I think it's optimistic for activists. I'm trying to think of anybody who's supported as an activist out there, and I'm not aware of any, and I kind of know, I'm not going to say all of them, but I kind of know all of them. So there's some that have their projects supported by industry, but I'm not aware of, there's definitely not a fleet of activists out there. There's definitely not enough activists, period, and there's certainly not enough of them being supported by this. So this would be theoretically interesting, but I'm not aware of that actually happening in case. At least in full. Like, well, I don't know, because we don't know people's thirst and what their how much money they're making. But at least I'm not aware of anybody who says they're a full-time activist based on their subscriptions. Doesn't anyone say humdinger or whiz-bang anymore? Both are underappreciated terms and great examples of onomatopoeia. I don't say humdinger because I'm pretty sure that's racist. And a whiz-bang has something to do with the Johnson. So I don't want to talk about that one either. Not on the air, not in front of a mixed company. Let's see. We've got the educational impact. By sharing knowledge and resources, activists empower their followers to become informed activists for the Second Amendment in their own communities. This definitely happens. I mean, I've seen a noticeable change with the engagement of the different activists that are out there in all the different realms. I've definitely seen people able to have different conversations than we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, for sure. I guess I missed the other side of this, raising awareness. Activists can use parasocial relationships to effectively educate their audience about, this bullshit, legislation and rights. How about that? Engaged followers are more likely to pay attention and act on educational content. Huh? I don't know where you came up with that, robot. But I don't think that's the case. So negative implications. Pressure and expectations. Maintaining a public image. Activists may feel pressures to maintain a certain image or persona to meet expectations of their followers. This can lead to stress and burnout. I think this is especially true. So if you're a content creator, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think this is especially true if you're fake. So if you're putting on some kind of bullshit like mask and then, or, different kind of personality mask that you're going to use when you're online, yeah, it's going to get a burden, right? You got to come up with that all the time. You got to do it. It's probably different than you. So yeah, it's something you got to do. I don't know anybody that I know a lot of people that just get online and go do their thing. And I don't know if they feel pressure, especially since they just quit. Every one of them just quits. Name one that hasn't just quit. So I don't think they feel pressured. But you'd have to ask them. I don't think anyone's done very many exit interviews on all the people that have quit their things and asked them why they quit. But there's as many reasons for quitting as there are for starting something. So I don't think it has to really, it certainly doesn't all fall back to not meeting expectations based on what their followers' feedback was. Let's see. Privacy concerns, increased visibility and perceived intimacy of parasocial relationships can blur the line between public and private life, leading to potential invasions of privacy. I guess that's potential with the internet becoming less new and more, well, there's people who live their entire life with the internet. That's less and less an issue. And you'd have to ask like one of the girls out there if it's still weird. Like the internet isn't weird for me, but nobody comes and does weird things to me. I mean, every once in a while, and I'll just block them and they're gone. Girls have probably a different interaction with the internet as far as the perceived intimacy and all that shit. I would like to think it's different than it was a bunch of years ago. One of the reasons we probably didn't see the number of females that we've got in the mix is because of the nature of the internet, the raw nature of the internet years ago. As the internet becomes less raw, I guess, anybody can feel more comfortable out here, right? I'm going to go take a sneak peek because we got a whole bunch of new people watching and I'm thinking they're all on X, not commenting. Yep, all over on X. So that's weird. Should I keep? I don't know. I don't get comments on X either. So you don't get comments to show up on the screen, but if you don't comment on X ever, then it's super creepy just broadcasting to a bunch of people that don't even comment. So comment. Let's see. Overzealous followers. This is, I don't know. Again, maybe back in the old days, maybe if you're, I don't know, maybe the doom and gloomers, I guess some of them have had some issues. Sorry, I'm reading and not saying though. Some followers might become overly attached or exhibit inappropriate behavior, requiring activists to manage and mitigate negative interactions. Well, I guess it depends on what you're going to call inappropriate behavior, because some people that'll be, a swear in the text or being mean to each other in the text, and other people, it's way further than that. Everybody's line is different there. So that's a tough one to suggest is true. The next one is safety risks. In extreme cases, overzealous followers could pose safety risks, necessitating additional security measures for the activist. In my entire time of being online and all this stuff, I've known about this is potentially like 3 or 4 times, and those were all a long time ago, and they were all like a couple of people, and they were all pretty much fake people looking for attention, essentially. So, yeah, if that's the case, then definitely figure out a way to let people know about it. But I don't know. Let me know if I'm wrong out there. But I'm not aware of. I mean, the last thing I can think of was a female who went online and quit doing her show based on this kind of shit. So I guess it does happen. But, what was I don't want to say who it was, but what was the odds of her staying online a long time anyway? She was sort of hey, guns are cool. Let me just experiment with guns for a little bit. Let me see how guns are like. I like them. Yeah, they're cool. Oh, wait. What's next? And usually people that do that are here and gone. They don't stick around. They don't collect their hobbies. They just experience their hobbies. So sometimes people like that say, oh, I'm out of here because of this and that, when in reality, they're also on to the next hobby. It's hard to know. And I wasn't that in following that closely. But anyway, so I can only know of a couple that were close. I just don't want to dismiss the ones that I'm not sure of. If there are issues, I don't want to dismiss them. But I certainly don't think that is a massive underlying issue that we're all, not talking about because we're scared of it or something. Again, if I'm wrong, let me know. Let's see. It's about to be June, and June 2nd is every second matters. Right on. Thanks for posting that. So let's see. Echo chambers and bias. I think this is a super big one. Strong parasocial relationships can create echo chambers where followers are exposed primarily to viewpoints that reinforce their existing beliefs, reducing exposure to diverse perspectives. Well, I don't know if that's a bad thing, but it is lame when they get stuck in a rut and they don't do anything except the rut. They figure out what makes their money and they just double down and then triple down and quadruple down on it. That's got to be useless. So I get that. But as far as the reducing exposure to diverse perspectives, until there's a law that says we have to be exposed to diverse perspectives, then I'll shoot my non-metric ammo. Thank you very much. Polarization. This can contribute to increased polarization on Second Amendment issues, making constructive dialogue with opposing viewpoints more challenging, for sure. But worse, well, I guess that's the same way of saying it. Making constructive dialogue with opposing viewpoints, like inside the gun realm and outside the gun realm, more challenging. So conversations with each other are stifled when we only know one song, and definitely with the other side. If we can only sing one song and the other side ain't understanding it, then we're useless. So the more tools we have in our toolbox, the better off we are with the other side. And that best way to get more tools in our toolbox is pick them up from each other. So echo chambers are not unnecessary. We do need echo chambers sometimes, but we don't need only echo chambers for sure. Then this bullshit ethical considerations, manipulative practice. Okay, I guess I'll take that one. Manipulative practices. There's a risk that activists might unintentionally exploit their parasocial relationships for personal gain, leading to ethical considerations about the manipulations of followers' trusts and emotions. I guess this is always at risk. So that's why as an audience, we always want to be aware of this situation. But as content creators, you can steer away from this pretty easily by not doing some weird shit that gets you into these areas, I think. And, again, watch more than one person do their thing. Some people steer clear from this because they don't have to, and some people steer clear from this because they don't want to, and other people just randomly steered clear from it. But try to think of how often. I guess I don't go near the people that dig into this, but there are some folks that definitely plow straight down this road, the manipulative practice bullshit, and essentially that's all they do. So hopefully you can discern as an observer or as an audience or as a participant when the manipulative stuff is happening. And then we got transparency and authenticity. Maintaining transparency and authenticity is crucial. Followers who feel deceived or manipulated may lose trust and disengage from the activist cause. So hopefully there's a differentiation, if that's the right way to say it, between the person and the cause, for sure. When the person and the cause are mixed together, that could be, this is probably the reason this is a big bad idea. I guess the other side of this is be careful, because maintaining transparency doesn't mean you have to be transparent, right? Like you can have transparency without being 100% transparent. You're allowed to have anonymity and still participate. It's bullshit to suggest everybody has to use their name and social security number and say their birth date just in order to be considered authentic, because that's kind of stupid. Those are all things that people use to attack you financially and other ways. So how about never tell your birth date to anybody? How about normalize just having conversations with ideas instead of these things that the big companies would like us to use, because facial recognition and everything else is super easy for robots. Motivators? Oh, I'm missing something. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Let's see. So then understanding the implications of parasocial relationships helps Second Amendment activists navigate the complexities of their influence, balancing the benefits of strong audience connections with the challenges and responsibilities that come with them. And again, I didn't really polish this up. This was, hey, this is interesting, and I'm going to spend some time, thanks to our Patreons, people at the bottom of the screen there that participate with our projects financially. They subscribe to our projects over on Patreon or here on YouTube. Those folks make it possible for me to spend time on this, but I'm not paid to do this full time. So I spent some time with the concept and then started asking the robots, which I pay for with the Patreon money. So thanks for that. I asked the robots some of these points, and the robots usually come out. It would be a whole nother show to show you what the robots came out with. But if this is printed out, probably, what is this, about 6 pages printed out maybe? The robots probably gave me 12 or 15 pages worth of stuff. And then I would not like the answer and kind of rephrase it. Or now I can say, make this less anti-gun, and it'll rewrite it and make it less anti-gun. Like it can do that kind of stuff now. So there was quite a few drafts and things. And then once I had a bunch of stuff, I cut and pasted. I just kind of grabbed and copy and pasted stuff into this presentation or whatever we're calling this here. So hopefully it's just the first poke at this. Let me know if it's worth poking at this again, and if it's worth bringing people in. Maybe you're one of those people who know about this. Let me know if you'd like to come on and talk about this stuff, if it is worthy, or maybe this is just another way to put words on an element of this that is also just, audience relationship. We all knew about this anyway. Maybe this is just defining a bunch of things for the fact of defining it. But hopefully it gives people some resistance to abuse and gives some of us some awareness of where we might not want to tread for fear of poking at things or abusing people and we're not intending to, or taking advantage of people in ways we don't intend to. Perhaps that's what I'm trying to say. All right, so with that, I'm going to throw a commercial up here. Since Foster said I think that's an interesting topic, I'm going to say thanks to him for giving us a couple of commercials. I'm going to throw a Gizzard Gary commercial up here. I think tomorrow he's got his here. I think the commercial will tell you.
This is Earl Benson reporting from downtown Topeka, where Gizzard Gary is rampaging through the city. Authorities have asked the public to stay indoors. They believe he will tire soon and need a nap. Gizzard Gary can normally be seen on Foul Territory Friday nights at 7 p.m. Central, Wednesday 8 p.m. for the channel members chat. Stay safe and give him the bird. Earl Benson signing off.
All right, so thanks again for everybody for joining us. Give me some feedback on this one, if this was a topic that's worth talking about, if it's worth going into ever again, and if you got anything to add to it. If you're listening as a podcast, I want to say thanks again, because there's a ton of people listening. We just added Player FM, Listen Notes, Samsung. So anyway, with the Samsung instead of an iTunes, or instead of an iPhone, Podchaser, and Boom Play. Evidently, we've already been on at least Listen Notes, and I think one of the others already. But now we have the data coming in through Podbean. So again, thanks to our Patreons. The Podbean subscription is something like $100 and something a year. So thanks for that. It gives us a chance to see all the data from the podcasts, and like I say, that's where most of the people are listening. Although today, most of the people are listening over on the X. So thanks to everybody listening on X. I don't usually acknowledge people on X because I never paid attention over here to that button. But if you're listening on X, leave a comment, and we will. This applies to people listening as the podcast too. If you leave a comment, we can address your comments in a future episode of the shows, which is one of the neat ways you can participate from the future in existing chats today. Our co-host came back up. He's not at all happy about the situation, but he did come back up. And my microphone, see, there's flies flying around in here. The podcast mic is breaking, so I'm going to take the podcast mic apart here and set it back up. All right, well, thanks again for everybody joining us. DJ dropping a bunch of links. Foss joining us. Anderson Manufacturing is out there. Agorizer jumped in here at the last minute. Eduardo, welcome. And Artac, Gizzard, and Mike White. Am I forgetting anybody? Dale might have been here still. Chief Fires was here earlier. I think I said Artac already. And New York Outcast was here today. What kind of co-host just ignores the chat? It's almost like he doesn't even care that the chat is happening right now. It's almost like he's not even aware of it.
GearWebsites.com is your source for firearms-based playing cards and books. We also have mugs, shirts, and posters with designs that we've made live. Of course, we have patches. Every Friday is Free Patch Friday. We appreciate your support. Thank you for shopping at GearWebsites.com.
This is the ASMR dog petting part of the show at the end. I add in this section. This is to add a parasocial relationship with people that like petting puppies. It's kind of like drums.